I've always been a man of routine. Wake up at 6 a.m., brew a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the neighbors, and sit at the kitchen table with the morning paper. My wife, Clara, usually joins me by 6:30, her hair still tousled from sleep, her smile soft and familiar. We've been married 12 years, and that rhythm, our rhythm, felt like the heartbeat of our home. The kids, Tommy and Lila, would tumble downstairs soon after, arguing over cereal or who got the better backpack for school. It was predictable, steady, mine. Clara's a painter. Not the kind who makes a fortune, but the kind who fills our house with color. Canvases propped against every wall, brushes scattered like fallen leaves. She's got this wild energy, a spark I fell for back when we were 22 and reckless. I'm the opposite. A tax accountant, all numbers and straight lines. People say opposites attract, and I believed it. She'd tease me about my buttoned-up shirts, and I'd laugh, pretending to mind. Lately, though, something's shifted. Subtle, like a draft you can't quite place. She's been spending more time in her studio, a shed out back I built her 5 years ago. She says she's working on a big project, something for a gallery show. I'm proud of her, always have been. But the late nights have stretched longer, and when she comes to bed, she smells faintly of turpentine and something else. Something musky, unfamiliar. I tell myself it's paint thinner, or maybe new brushes. I'm not the jealous type. Never had reason to be. Last Tuesday, I noticed her phone buzzing more than usual. She'd glance at it, smile faintly, then tuck it away. Just a friend from the art co-op, she'd say when I asked. I nodded, sipping my coffee, letting it go. Trust is the bedrock of us, I thought. 12 years don't crumble over a buzzing phone. But that night, as I folded laundry in the basement, I found a receipt in her jeans pocket. Dinner for 2 at La Rosetta, a fancy place we've never been together. $68. I stood there, staring at the crumpled paper, my pulse ticking up. She hadn't mentioned dinner out. Maybe it was a client, I reasoned. Artists' network. It's normal. Still, I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I watched her more closely. She hummed as she stirred oatmeal, her movements light, almost giddy. She caught me staring and laughed. What's with you, Mark? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile, said something about tax season stress. She kissed my forehead, her lips warm, and I felt foolish for doubting her. Clara's my wife. My Clara. But as she left for the studio, phone in hand, that musky scent trailed behind her, and the receipt burned a hole in my mind. By Thursday, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The receipt wasn't just a fluke. It was a splinter under my skin, working deeper. I started paying attention to things I'd brushed off before, like how she'd take calls outside, her voice low, laughing in a way that felt private, not meant for me, or how she'd come home with smudges of paint on her neck. Odd places for an artist who's supposed to be brushing canvas, not herself. I told myself I was paranoid, that tax season always made me overthink. But doubt's a funny thing, it grows in the quiet. I decided to test it. That evening, I offered to bring her dinner in the studio. You've been working so hard, I said, casual as I could manage. Her eyes flickered, surprise, maybe panic, before she smiled. Oh, that's sweet, but I'm good. I'll grab something later. She kissed me quick and darted back out. I stood in the kitchen, holding a plate of leftover lasagna, feeling like an idiot. The kids were at a sleepover, so the house was silent, amplifying every thought. I didn't go to the studio. Not yet. Instead, I dug deeper. Her laptop was on the coffee table, password unprotected. Clara's never been one for secrets, or so I thought. I opened her email, heart pounding like I was committing a crime. Most of it was mundane. Gallery inquiries, supply orders. Then I saw it. A thread with someone named J. No last name, just J. The subject line, Tuesday was incredible. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The messages were short but loaded. Can't stop thinking about it, J wrote. Clara replied, me neither. Next time we'll have more time. My hands shook as I scrolled. No details, no plans spelled out, but the tone. It was intimate, alive in a way her texts to me never were. I closed the laptop, bile rising in my throat. Who was Jay? A client? A friend? Something more? I wanted to storm the studio, demand answers, but I didn't. I sat there, staring at the wall, letting it fester. Friday morning, I followed her. She said she was meeting a supplier downtown, but I called in sick and tailed her in my old Ford. She didn't go downtown. She drove to a coffee shop on the edge of town, one I'd never heard of. I parked across the street, watching through tinted windows as she stepped out, her sundress catching the light. She looked beautiful, too beautiful for a supplier meeting. Then a man approached her. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a grin I could see from 50 yards away. They hugged. Not a quick, friendly hug. A lingering one, her hands on his back, his on her waist. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I didn't confront her that day. Couldn't. My mind was a storm. Anger, disbelief, a hollow ache I didn't have a name for. I drove home, the image of Clara and that man branded behind my eyes. He wasn't just a friend. I knew it in my bones. The way she leaned into him, the ease of their laughter as they walked inside. It was a dance I'd never been invited to. I spent the afternoon pacing, replaying every moment of our marriage, looking for cracks I'd missed. She came home at 6, cheerful as ever. "Supplier meeting went great," she said, tossing her bag on the counter. I nodded, pouring myself a scotch, something I rarely did before dinner. She didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. The kids were still at their friends', so it was just us. I asked about her day, fishing for lies. She talked about paint prices, a new canvas size she wanted to try. No mention of coffee shops or tall strangers. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted to her phone when it buzzed. She didn't check it. Not in front of me. That night I couldn't sleep. She was beside me, breathing softly, her warmth a mockery of everything I thought we had. I slipped out of bed and went to the garage, where I kept an old toolbox. Inside was a spare key to her studio. I'd made it years ago, just in case. At 2 a.m., I crept out back, the night air cold against my skin. The studio was dark, locked. I turned the key, stepped inside, and flicked on my phone's flashlight. It smelled like her. Turpentine, lavender, that musky undertone. Her easels held half-finished landscapes, nothing unusual. But in the corner, under a tarp, I found something else. A sketchbook. I opened it, and my breath caught. Page after page of drawings, intimate, detailed portraits of a man. The man from the coffee shop. His eyes, his jaw, the curve of his shoulders. Some were just him. Others showed him with her, their faces close, hands entwined. My chest tightened. These weren't fantasies. They were memories. I sat there, surrounded by her art, feeling the life I'd built unravel. The receipt, the emails, the hug. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. Clara, my Clara, was giving pieces of herself to someone else. I closed the sketchbook, locked the studio, and went back to bed. She didn't stir as I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. For the next week, I wore a mask, smiled at breakfast, kissed her goodbye, asked about her day like nothing was wrong. Inside, I was a furnace, rage and hurt smoldering, waiting for a spark. I needed proof, something undeniable, before I acted. The sketchbook was a wound, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to catch her in the act, to see the betrayal with my own eyes. So I watched, waited, planned. She kept up her routine. Studio time, vague excuses, phone buzzing like a metronome. I started tracking her, small things at first. Noted when she left, when she returned, how long she was gone. I even checked her car's mileage once. 50 miles more than a trip to the co-op should have been. She didn't notice my scrutiny. Or maybe she did and thought I was too dull to suspect her. That stung worse than the lies. I dug into J. The email address was a dead end. Some generic provider, no name attached. But I remembered the coffee shop. Saturday, I went back alone, sat in the same spot I'd watched from, and waited. An hour later, he showed up. Same dark hair, same easy grin. He ordered a latte, chatted with the barista like a regular. I snapped a photo with my phone, zoomed in. Up close, he was older than I'd thought, mid-40s maybe, with lines around his eyes. Handsome, sure, but not extraordinary. What did she see in him? I followed him when he left. He drove a sleek black Audi to a loft downtown, one of those artsy buildings with exposed brick and overpriced rent. I parked a block away, watched him disappear inside. A quick search on my phone pulled up the building's directory, Jasper Hale, Unit 4B. J. It fit. I sat there, engine idling, imagining Clara in that loft, laughing, touching him. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the wheel to steady them. That night, Clara said she had a gallery meeting. I didn't argue, just nodded, kissed her cheek, told her to have fun. As soon as she left, I called a sitter for the kids and drove to Jasper's building. Her car was there, parked crooked like always. I waited, heart hammering, until they emerged, arm in arm, her head on his shoulder. They didn't see me. I followed them to a restaurant, watched through the window as they shared wine, their hands brushing across the table. It was tender, effortless, everything we weren't. Seeing them together flipped a switch. The hurt didn't fade. It sharpened, hardened into something cold and deliberate. I wasn't just a wounded husband anymore. I was a man with a purpose. Revenge. Not the loud, messy kind, yelling, throwing things. No, I wanted something slower, deeper. Something that'd carve into her soul the way she'd carved into mine. I drove home that night, mind racing, plotting. First, I needed more. Evidence wasn't just for confrontation, it was leverage. Sunday, while she took the kids to the park, I rigged her studio. A tiny camera, motion-activated, hidden in a stack of paint cans. I bought it online, overnight shipping, no questions asked. It linked to my phone, silent and discreet. By Monday, it was live. She didn't suspect a thing. Why would she? I was Mark, the predictable accountant, not a man who'd spy. The footage came fast. Tuesday afternoon, Jasper showed up. The camera caught it all. Her unlocking the door, him stepping inside, their embrace. They didn't stay long. Just enough for a kiss, a laugh, a promise of later. My stomach churned, but I didn't look away. I saved the clip, time-stamped it. Wednesday, same thing. Longer this time, their voices muffled but their intent clear. I had what I needed. Proof. Ammunition. Next, I researched Jasper. Public records gave me his basics. 44, divorced, no kids, an architect with a small firm. Social media filled in the rest. Photos of him at art events, grinning with pretentious types. Clara was in some of those photos, tagged as friend. Friend. The word tasted like ash. I cross-referenced dates. Times she'd been working late matched his posts. A pattern emerged, a timeline of her deceit. The revenge took shape Thursday night. I couldn't unmake her choice, but I could make her feel it. Every ounce of the betrayal turned back on her. I'd use her art, her passion, the thing she loved most. And Jasper? He'd pay too. Not with violence, I'm not that man, but with loss. I'd strip them both bare, leave them with nothing but the wreckage. I poured another scotch, opened my laptop, and started typing. The plan was cruel, meticulous, and entirely mine. By Friday, the plan was more than a spark, it was a blueprint. I'd spent nights awake, refining it, letting the anger fuel my focus. Clara's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a violation of everything I'd built. Our home, our family, our trust. She'd handed her heart to Jasper, painted him into her world, and left me as a shadow in my own life. I'd make them both regret it, not with fists or shouts, but with something sharper. Exposure. The camera in her studio kept feeding me glimpses. Saturday, they met again. Longer this time, their laughter filtering through the grainy audio. I watched, jaw tight, as she showed him a canvas, her hands brushing his arm. It wasn't just affection. It was collaboration. She was painting with him, letting him into her art in a way she'd never let me. That stung deeper than any touch. I saved every frame, building a library of their undoing. I started with Jasper. His architecture firm had a website, sleek, professional, full of glowing testimonials. I dug deeper, found his clients. Developers, gallery owners, wealthy patrons. People who valued reputation. I created an anonymous email account, simple and untraceable, and drafted a message. Jasper Hale's personal conduct may interest you, it read. No specifics yet, just a tease, a hook. I attached a still from the studio footage, his face clear, Clara's blurred but recognizable to anyone who knew her. I didn't send it. Not yet. Timing was everything. Clara noticed nothing. Sunday brunch, she chatted about the kids' school projects, her voice bright. I nodded, buttered my toast, played the part. But I was watching, her phone stayed face down, buzzing twice. She ignored it, but her fingers twitched. Gallery stuff, she said when I raised an eyebrow. I smiled, said I was glad she was busy. Inside, I was coiling tighter, ready to strike. The kids laughed, oblivious, and I envied them. That night, I went further. Her sketchbook was still in the studio. I'd left it untouched, but now I needed more. I slipped out after she slept, unlocked the shed, and flipped through it again. The drawings had multiplied, new pages, more intimate, her hand lingering on his likeness. At the back, I found notes. Dates, times, a scrawled, Jay's place, 8 p.m. Evidence of their rhythm. I photographed every page, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a second life, one she'd hidden in plain sight. Monday, I escalated. Jasper's firm had an annual showcase coming up, Friday night, a big event for clients and critics. I'd found it on his social media, all polished photos and RSVPs. Perfect. I finalized the email, adding more stills. Him in her studio, their hands close, her smile radiant. The message was cold, factual. Jasper Hale entertains married collaborators in private. See for yourself. I sent it to 5 of his biggest clients, anonymous and untraceable, then deleted the account. Let them whisper, let them doubt. I wanted his world to tremble first. Clara came home late that night, distracted. Rough day, she muttered, pouring wine. I asked if everything was okay, voice calm. She nodded, too quick, and changed the subject to Tommy's soccer game. I let it slide, but I saw it, her edge, her unease. Maybe Jasper had called, rattled by a client's cold shoulder. Good. I sipped my coffee, hiding a grim satisfaction. The kids were upstairs, and the house felt like a stage, her playing the wife, me the fool no longer. Tuesday, I checked her phone. She'd left it on the counter while showering. A rare slip. The passcode was still our anniversary. Ironic that texts from Jasper. Something's off. Meeting canceled today. Her reply, don't worry, probably nothing. I smirked, deleted my tracks, and put it back. She emerged, towel-wrapped, humming. I complimented her tune, and she blushed, oblivious to the noose tightening. Wednesday, I struck again. Her gallery show was in 2 weeks, her big project she'd been teasing. I'd seen it in the studio footage, huge canvases, bold and raw, inspired by him. I called the gallery, anonymous, posing as a concerned patron. Clara Evans' work seems derivative lately. Rumors of personal scandals, too. Might hurt your reputation. The curator stammered, promised to look into it. I hung up, heart pounding. Her art was her soul. I'd taint it, twist it, make it a mirror of her deceit. That night, she was quiet. Gallery's acting weird, she said over dinner. I feigned concern, asked if she needed help. She shook her head, eyes distant. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then I remembered the sketchbook, the coffee shop, the wine. No, she'd chosen this. I'd just make sure she lived it. Thursday, the fallout began. Jasper's firm posted a vague apology online. Scheduling conflicts, canceling the showcase. I scrolled through comments. Clients grumbling, speculation bubbling. My email had worked, seeds planted, roots spreading. I pictured him pacing his loft, phone in hand, wondering who'd turned on him. Clara, too, was fraying. She spent all day in the studio, came back pale. They're delaying the show, she said, voice tight. No reason why. I offered sympathy, poured her tea, asked gentle questions. She brushed me off, said it was stress. But I saw the cracks. Her hands shook. Her phone stayed silent. Jasper hadn't texted since Tuesday. Maybe he suspected her, or maybe he was scrambling to save himself. Either way, they were drifting apart, and I hadn't even shown my face. The kids noticed her mood. Lila asked why Mommy was sad. "Just work," I said, ruffling her hair. If only they knew. Friday, I upped the ante. I printed the sketchbook photos, dozens of them, and mailed them to Jasper's office. Anonymous. No note. Let him open the envelope, see her devotion staring back, and wonder who'd sent it. I imagined his confusion, his paranoia. Would he confront her? Accuse her? I didn't care as long as it burned. I dropped the package in a public mailbox. Gloves on, no trace. Tax season taught me precision, now it served a darker purpose. Clara stayed home that night, pacing. "Jasper's not answering," she muttered, thinking I couldn't hear. I froze mid-dishwashing, then kept scrubbing. She'd slipped his name out loud, unguarded. I turned casual and asked who Jasper was. Her face flushed. "Oh, just a colleague. He's been off lately." A lie clumsy and thin. I nodded, let it hang. She retreated to the studio, and I smiled into the suds. The mask was slipping, hers, not mine. Saturday, the tension snapped. Clara's phone rang at breakfast. Jasper. She stepped outside, voice low, but I caught fragments. "What's happening? Who would do this?" I sipped my coffee, watching through the window as she gestured wildly. When she came back, her eyes were red. "Everything's falling apart," she said, sinking into a chair. I asked what she meant, soft as velvet. She waved it off, gallery nonsense. But her hands betrayed her, twisting her napkin to shreds. I checked the camera later. She'd gone to the studio alone, sat staring at her canvases, then tore one apart. Ripped it with her hands, sobbing. I watched, unmoved. That painting was hers and Jasper's, a monument to their secret. Now it was trash. Good. I saved the clip, added it to my arsenal. Her world was crumbling, and I'd barely begun. Jasper's firm announced a temporary closure online that afternoon. More comments, angry clients, canceled projects. My emails had spread, a quiet poison. I pictured him alone in that loft, reputation bleeding out. Clara left again, said she needed air. I followed, discreet, and saw her pull up to his building. She banged on the door, but he didn't answer. She slumped against it, defeated. I drove home, satisfied. Isolation was step one. Let them lose each other before they lost everything. That night, she barely spoke. The kids asked if she was sick. She forced a smile, said no. I tucked them in, then sat with my laptop, reviewing the plan. Next came the gallery, her pride. I'd saved the best for last. Something public, permanent. A wound she couldn't paint over. I poured a scotch, toasted the dark, and waited for Sunday. Sunday morning, Clara was a ghost. She moved through the house, hollow-eyed, barely touching her coffee. "I need to fix this," she mumbled, grabbing her keys. I didn't ask where. She'd stopped pretending it was just work. The kids were at church with my sister, so I had the house to myself. I opened the camera feed. She was back in the studio, packing canvases, muttering to herself. "He's gone," she said, voice breaking. Jasper had cut her loose, I guessed. Perfect. I finalized the gallery strike. Her show was rescheduled for next Saturday. Desperate, she'd begged them. I'd overheard. I called a friend, a printer who owed me a favor. "Need a rush job," I said. "Posters, big ones. Anonymous client." He didn't ask questions. I sent him the sketchbook scans, her drawings of Jasper, intimate and raw, overlaid with text. Clara Evans, Art of Deception. Opening night reveal. No violence, no threats, just truth in black and white. I paid cash, had them shipped to the gallery, timed for Friday delivery. Jasper's silence held. His social media went dark, his firm's site offline. My seeds had grown, clients fleeing, trust shattered. He'd lost his career. Now he'd lose her if he hadn't already. Clara came home at dusk, paint-streaked, exhausted. "It's over," she said, dropping her bag. I raised an eyebrow. The show. She shook her head. Everything. I didn't push, let her stew in it. She didn't know I was the architect of her ruin, and that was the beauty of it. That night, I reviewed the footage, the emails, the plan. 1 week left. The posters would hit, her art would turn against her, and Jasper's collapse would be the backdrop. She'd face the crowd, see her secrets splashed across walls, and know she'd lost it all, her passion, her lover, her mask. I'd stand beside her, the faithful husband, while she burned. Cruel? Maybe, but she'd lit the match. I just fanned the flames. Monday brought a deceptive stillness. Clara drifted through the house, quieter than ever. Her spark dimmed. She didn't mention Jasper, didn't explain her cryptic "everything's over" from Sunday. I didn't ask. I knew enough. The kids sensed the shift, clinging to me instead of her. Mommy's tired. I told them, and they nodded, accepting it. She spent the day in the studio, but the camera showed no painting, just pacing, staring at her work like it was a stranger. I checked the printer's progress. The posters were done, stacked and ready, set to arrive at the gallery Friday morning. I'd paid extra to ensure they'd be opened late. Too late for Clara to stop them, early enough for the staff to hang them. The design was simple but vicious. Her sketches of Jasper, blown up with that damning caption. Her art would betray her, just as she'd betrayed me. I imagined her face when she saw it, shock, then shame, fueled me. Jasper's collapse continued. A local blog posted about his firm's sudden closure, hinting at scandals. My anonymous emails had spread beyond clients. Rumors now swirled in the art circles Clara loved. She hadn't noticed yet, too lost in her own unraveling. I kept up the act, cooked dinner, asked about her day. She barely ate, muttered about the show. "It's all I have left," she said, eyes hollow. I nodded, hiding the chill in my chest. Not for long, I thought. Tuesday, I added a twist. I mailed a single sketchbook photo to her parents, and signed, postmarked out of state. They'd always adored her art, bragged about her talent. Let them see what she'd poured it into. I pictured their confusion, their calls to her, the questions she couldn't answer. Small cuts, deepening the wound. She came home that night, phone buzzing. Her mom, I guessed. She didn't pick up, just stared at it, pale. I asked if she was okay. "Fine," she lied, voice brittle. The week crawled on, each day tightening the noose. I slept little, fueled by coffee and purpose. Clara's world was shrinking. Jasper gone. Her show teetering, her family stirring. She didn't suspect me, didn't see the strings I pulled. That was the genius of it. I was invisible, the architect of her ruin, standing right beside her. Friday loomed, and I waited, patient as stone. Thursday, Clara cracked further. She left early, said she was meeting the gallery curator to sort things out. I followed, discreet as always. She parked downtown, stormed inside, her gestures wild through the glass. The curator looked flustered, shaking his head. She emerged an hour later, tears streaking her face, and drove to Jasper's loft. He didn't answer again. She sat in her car, head in her hands, then sped off. I tailed her home, unseen. The camera caught her breakdown. She tore through the studio, smashing brushes, kicking easels. "Why?" she screamed, voice raw. I watched live, my phone screen glowing in the dark kitchen. She didn't know about the posters, didn't know the worst was coming. This was just the prelude. Her lover lost, her art tainted, her control slipping. I saved the footage, another piece for later. She came inside at midnight, exhausted, and collapsed on the couch. I left her there, silent. Friday morning, the delivery hit. I timed it perfectly, 9 a.m., when the gallery staff would be prepping. I called in sick, stayed home, watched Clara scramble. She left at noon, dressed sharp, forcing a smile for the kids. "Big night tomorrow," she said, kissing their heads. I nodded, wished her luck. She didn't see my eyes, cold, steady, waiting. The posters would be up by now, staff buzzing, whispers spreading. I pictured it. Her sketches plastered across walls, her secret bared. I drove by the gallery that afternoon, slow and casual. The windows were covered, but I saw shadows moving, staff, maybe patrons, reacting. Good. I didn't linger, didn't need to. The trap was set. Clara texted me at 5. Show's still on. See you tomorrow? I replied. Wouldn't miss it. She didn't know I'd be there to watch her fall, not to cheer. The kids stayed with my sister that night, leaving the house empty. I sat alone, sipping scotch, counting hours. Saturday, the gallery opening arrived. Clara left early, nervous energy masking her strain. It'll be fine, she said, more to herself than me. I smiled, promised to bring the kids later. She nodded, oblivious, and drove off. I waited an hour, then dressed, suit crisp, face calm. The kids were excited, chattering about Mommy's art. I let them think it was a celebration. They'd see soon enough. We arrived at 7 p.m. The gallery was packed. Critics, artists, locals, all milling under soft lights. Clara stood near the entrance, greeting guests, her smile tight. Then she saw it. The posters lined the walls. Not her landscapes, not her big project, but her sketches of Jasper. Huge, vivid, undeniable. Clara Evans, Art of Deception, they screamed. The crowd murmured, heads turning. Her face drained of color, hands trembling as she stared. I guided the kids forward, playing the proud husband. Look at Mommy's work, I said, voice even. Tommy pointed, confused. Who's that man? Clara spun, saw us, and froze. Guests whispered. Some recognized Jasper, others guessed. Her curator approached, face grim. We didn't authorize this, he hissed. She stammered, I don't. But the damage was done. Eyes followed her, judging, peeling away her mask. She grabbed my arm, pulled me aside. Mark, what's happening? Her voice shook, desperate. I shrugged, calm as ice. Looks like your art's speaking for itself. She searched my face, saw nothing. Then realization flickered. You? She whispered. I didn't answer, just stepped back. Let her drown in it. The kids tugged my hands, asking to leave. I nodded, led them out, leaving her surrounded by her wreckage, her lover's face staring down, her shame on display. Clara didn't come home that night. The gallery called me at midnight. She'd fled after an hour, crowd buzzing, critics snapping photos. Her show was a scandal, not a triumph. I tucked the kids in, said Mommy was busy. They slept. I didn't. Sunday, she stumbled in at dawn, eyes swollen, paint streaked. Mark, she croaked. We need to talk. I poured coffee, sat across from her, waited. She confessed, halting, broken. Jasper, months ago, a spark at an art event. It wasn't planned, she said, tears falling. He understood me, my work. I listened, face blank. She didn't know about the camera, the emails, the posters, just thought someone had exposed her. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'll end it. Too late, I thought. Jasper was gone, his firm dead, his name mud. Her apology was ash. I stood, voice low. You painted him into our life, Clara. You chose. She flinched, begged me to stay, to forgive. I didn't answer, just packed a bag. Took the kids to my sister's. Monday, her parents called me, furious, ashamed. They'd seen the sketch, pieced it together. How could she? Her mom wept. I played dumb, let them rage. Her world shrank. Family, friends, art, all turning away. By Tuesday, the story hit local papers. Artist's secret lover revealed at show. Photos of the posters, quotes from stunned guests. Clara's name was poison now. Galleries dropped her. Co-op shunned her. I watched from afar, untouched. She'd lost everything she valued, not by my hand in their eyes, but by her own. That was the cruelty. Her ruin was hers, and she'd never prove otherwise. A week later, I filed for divorce. Clara didn't fight, couldn't really. She moved out, a shell, renting a cheap studio downtown. The kids stayed with me. She saw them weekends, her visits quiet, strained. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said once, voice small. I nodded, said nothing. She didn't know I'd orchestrated it all, the emails, the posters, the collapse. She thought it was fate or karma. I let her. Jasper vanished. Left town, rumors said, his career ashes. Clara's art dried up. No one bought her work. No one cared. I kept the house, the kids, my life, scarred but standing. Friends praised my strength, pitied my betrayal. I played the part, let the lie hold. The revenge was complete. Her passion turned weapon, her lover dust, her name a cautionary tale. Cruel? Yes. But she'd painted the first stroke. I just finished the canvas.